Welcome back to Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Prowler only. Last time we took on, I believe, Hyper Gold Rathian and maybe another monster. I think it was just Hyper Gold Rathian, though. It's been a bit since I've actually recorded. This time we're going to go back down the step into the easier, somewhat easier. They're still in the last rank, but the other hyper monsters. And we're taking on two ice monsters today, so I don't have to switch my weapon out, thankfully. First one we're fighting is Barioth, Hyper Barioth, and the quest called Setting the Barioth High. It's very interesting wordplay there. Has us hunting a Hyper Barioth in the Frozen Seaway. Go ahead and take the quest, and I'll head on out. Alright, Hyper Barioth is not a monster to take lightly. It is the same as regular Barioth in that regard. He can very easily catch you off guard. He's very close to being a 5th gen monster in a 4th gen game. He's fast. He does not have a lot of downtime. That's, kind of his whole gimmick. Once you get the legs broken, he'll slow down a bit. But until then, you're really just going to have to bide your time carefully and learn the amount of attacks you can get off safely in between his attacks. The only chance you really get for a Mega Boomerang before his legs are broken are when he does a random taunt. And I say random because I have no idea if you can even tell when it's going to happen. I've seen him do it after a single attack. I've seen him do it after like a long string of combos. I've also seen him not do it after a long string of combos. So I'm not sure. A lot of times he'll do it after the hit check right there. And as you can see, he's doing it. However, he does not do it after every hit check. So your guess is as good as mine as to when he does it. Your best bet is just trying to be aware that it can happen and hopefully getting the correct prediction on it, because it's not a long enough tell if you don't know that it's coming out. Obviously, if you can just position out of the way of the hip check and get a Mega Boomerang revving up, you'll be fine. But if you're doing it right after the animation starts, you'll have a bit of a chance to not get it out and take damage, or get it out and take damage. So it's not completely safe. And, that's why you just want to go for the legs first. I know the face is very nice and shiny, and it has that nice 14% extra damage it's taking. But once the legs are charged with Hyper, they'll take that extra 14% damage. So that will, at the very least, help you strip those away somewhat faster. And really, I'm just going to try to be as fast as possible taking them out. You can see he did the taunt there. No tell, really. As far as I'm aware, maybe there's just like some weird thing he does that you can tell, but for the most part, it's more or less just a chance for you to get some extra regular damage off. If you're running like a melee hybrid build, you may be able to use Feline Comet for that. If you're doing like one that spams Feline Comet, that's pretty good. Claw Dance I wouldn't say is very safe at all either, because you're completely locked into that. You can't throw it early or anything. And I don't think there's really anything else. I guess if you're using a bomber build, you can use your Mega Barrel Bomb. I wouldn't go for Giga because I think that would take too long. However, again, it just really depends on at what point do you notice he's doing the taunt. I'm going to throw this one out here. He does like to tackle a lot, and that's really going to be the main one. That and then the swoop. The swoop is kind of weird hitbox-wise. A lot of times it'll look like it'll hit you and it doesn't. However, you obviously don't want to rely on that. You want to assume it's going to hit you, especially if you're using an adept weapon. However, if you're not using an adept weapon, it might be a good idea to find where the sweet spot is in that attack. It would take some, getting used to and probably getting hit a couple of times to actually figure that out, but you should be fine. A lot of times after the jumping sweep, he will do a little tackle afterwards. Not always, but it's good to assume. That way you're not, in the middle of throwing your second boomerang and not being able to dodge out of the way of it. It's a very quick back and forth fight. He's going to tackle here, I think. No, not tackle, just a regular. He can combo an attack after, for the most part. The little ice tornadoes that he does from neutral are fairly large. They will apply you with snowman, so if you want to avoid that, try to stay out of the way of it. If you're using non-stick fur, I don't really recommend, honestly, using non-stick fur against a fast monster like this. Because, as you know, it'll take a couple of seconds to break out of it still, and then once you're doing that, you can't move until after you do the little kick animation the cat does. So you are vulnerable during that, which is not great at all. You want to be able to activate your soothing roll and just, have those off frames to position out of the way of any tackles or something he does. For the most part, you're probably fine, but you'd rather not, especially after taking a hit from the Ice Tornado. You know, you've already taken some damage, so it's easy to get comboed by that. Tail is a good hit zone, face is a good hit zone. I have not looked at the specific hit zone values, but it's a pseudo wyvern, so usually the tail and the heads are good hit zones, and especially when they're applied with hyper, they're even better. So, you know, they'll be good to go for once we get the legs broken. Comes the hip check. I'm gonna be greedy here and try to throw this out. Did not work, but he did a back cop, so that's good. I may be able to dodge this here. Didn't quite get it, and that's a decent chunk of damage. You know, obviously we have slightly lower defense than a Blade Master, so you'd be taking less damage if you're using one of those, and more damage if you're using a gunner weapon. But ideally, if you're using a gunner weapon, you're kind of positioning a bit better than cats normally do. You've got a little bit more range. You're a little bit more strict in your range as well, because you have to play with critical distance, and we do not, thankfully. Little jump there. He's going to tackle, try to get off to the side. His hitboxes are fairly clean for the most part. There are some wide arcing ones that, you know, they don't look off, but they do go pretty far. It's a lot of the ones that are shared with Nargacuga. He doesn't really share anything with Tigrex at all. It really is just air Nargacuga. I find him to be more difficult than, you know, Nargacuga, though. He has a lot more anti-range options, whether it be the Ice Tornado or just being able to fly and do a very wide circular motion, hitting everything in his path as he comes back down. He's very much single strike, so you're still fine as long as you're not being greedy. So as long as you're like not just mindlessly spamming the A button, you'll have chances to dodge it. It's a very fair fight. It's just you have to be careful to not overstep your bounds. I believe both of his arms are now covered, and as you saw there, he touched me with his body, but I didn't take, at the very least, a large amount of damage. He maybe hit me with some chip damage, but have hardly any damage on me right now, which I don't even think I actually took any, but it's possible I did. All right, next area, his arms are now covered in hyper, so we're going to really try to actually get some damage off here. This is a good fight for boomerang spins because, again, he's fast, single strike, but you do have some leeway on your lighter attack, so I can spin here and be perfectly fine. He has a lot of wind up to his attacks as well, too. So again, it's fair just as long as, you know, you don't not prep for a combo. The combos are the scariest part of them. Everything else is fairly manageable as long as, you know, you're positioning correctly. And again, we have a lot more chances to position quote unquote correctly because we have adept dodges, so we don't have to worry about not being able to iframe something. That was way too early on the hip check there. That may be slightly slower because it has hyper on it. And obviously during the roar, you do have a chance for Mega Boomerang. I started this a little bit too late, so I'm in a bit of danger, but he decided to do something very slow, so I'm honestly fine with that. He's probably going to do a tackle or something here. That did hit me, but since it was just kind of a tail hitbox, it didn't really do that much. It just kind of tripped me. Go ahead and heal a couple of times. Dodge that. It's probably going to tackle or something. Get out of the way there. Throw that boomerang off into the wild blue and not hit anything with it. Oh, maybe it clipped him on the way back. He also can double his hip check. Again, he can combo stuff. It's not anything specific that he combos. He's very free-flowing in that regard. So it's not anything, you know, you can absolutely have down to a science. Other than that, he'll usually lead with a combo tackle. But as you saw before, he can also use a tornado or something out of it. So it's not 100% of the time, but most of the time he'll do a tackle after his little tackle spin thing. More tornadoes. Fairly large hitbox on that, but not, you know, too large. You saw I was in the middle of it still somewhat, and it didn't actually touch me. So it's more of a get a feel for it than a you have to absolutely avoid every single pixel of this effect or else you'll be hit by it. And, you know, that's generally more fun, but I don't know. It really just depends, honestly. It's going to do a tornado here. Way too late on that. You can, I believe, this is a weird, okay, so weird interaction. I think if you block or get hit, either one, of the little shard that he shoots out of his mouth for the tornado, it can dispel the tornado because it doesn't hit the ground. If it hits the ground, it'll create a tornado, but if you get hit or block it, like with a shield or something, I think it'll dispel it. So kind of an interesting team play effort, I guess. It's very rare that you actually see that because a lot of the times attacks just kind of go through or something like that. Either that, you know, or it's a tackle where obviously the tiny shield is not going to stop the very heavy creature from just barreling straight through you. So while you won't take damage, anyone else behind you will still take damage. It is an interesting thing, and I think they do more of that in 5th gen and even in 6th gen, but it doesn't always happen in the earlier games, but it does happen occasionally, and it is neat to see. There's not really any practical use, I guess, for it, because it's not like you're gonna completely always plan for it. And even then, especially while the legs aren't broken, a lance is probably not gonna want to stick to the face constantly, like in solo play or something, which I guess is a moot point because it doesn't matter in solo play. If you get hit by it, it's just you that really matters. I guess if you're trying to save your cats, it's important, but cats are more important for Prowler players, which in general are not really going to be right next to the monster's face for the most part. Again, it all depends what you're playing, what the play style is, but for the most part, you should not really be in front of the face unless you're like getting greedy or something like that with a boomerang play style. You can, obviously, if you're trying to get some mega boomerang spins off, but I prefer to wait until the legs are broken to start being really aggressive like that, because you just are allowed to do it a little bit more. I think this should be somewhat safe. Hopefully, okay, nope. I forgot he does enter the zone like that. I didn't see it a single time in the test hunt, so he didn't catch me off guard. He's a very surprising monster. Should tackle after this, so I'm gonna wait this one out and then counter him. And the legs are still somewhat beefy. You know, I've not been attacking them really too directly. He's all over the place a lot of the time, so it is kind of hard to pick your hit zones. But I'll try to be a little bit more picky about that and see if we can't get a break pretty quickly. There's a tusk break, I believe. Those break pretty quickly, so it's not really a sign you're doing a lot of damage. I mean, I am 10 minutes into this, though, so fair enough. I've probably gotten, I'd say at least close to half, probably 60% at least. The test hunt was almost 20 minutes. It hadn't hit the 20-minute section yet, but it was very deep into the 15-minute mark. So he's not too, again, he's a glass cannon, so he's not going to be too HP spongy. It's just the main thing is that since he's so nimble, it's kind of hard to get some good hits off on him. I'm sure Greatsword head sniping is very good against this monster as long as you're very, you know, skilled with it. But if you're not, you're going to have a more difficult time just by nature of him jumping around a lot. All right, finally get a leg break. Didn't actually take too long after actually focusing it, not just, you know, kind of playing hit or miss with it. So now, at the very least, for one half of the body, we'll have a pretty good opening. I don't think it's, I don't know. I don't remember how it works in this game, and it may work the same in every single game, even the later ones, where now that you've broken one leg, he's slower, and it may just slow him down a little bit more. But as you can see, he's got a lot more recoil, especially on his aerial attacks. So every time he does an air attack, you should be fine to get a mega boomerang off. Again, really depends on how you're positioned and whether or not you're in the middle of something. So for the most part, you shouldn't be in the middle of anything that isn't, you know, a mega boomerang toss, which is kind of the whole point. But if you are off to like a weird angle or something and you have to reposition, you may not get it in time. I can actually start spinning quite a bit though, and this is really where you can start actually getting right in his face and not having to worry too much about tail sweeps or stuff. He's gonna try to do a landing attack here. This is a bit greedy, but I think it'll be fine. Yes, he's just repositioning, so it'll be good. May get hit by that. I'm not. Good deal. Try and spin into his leg again. And also, this is a good fight once you get the legs broken to actually use your boomerang spins as a reposition. If you get the damage off, great. And if not, you're in a better position anyways than you would have been. Comes the blast. We'll dodge into it. Swap a couple of times. There we go. That's another break. And always, if you get a knockdown, I believe those count as wing breaks as well in the air. So you will get a actual air topple. So you'll get a great chance to use Mega Boomerang there. He toppled into a roar, which is good, into a jump. So I'll be able to get a bunch of Mega Boomerangs off here. And that tail swipe, as you saw there, works exactly the same as regular Nargacuga's, where the arm is also a hitbox there that you can adapt into. Now, obviously, it's not exactly the same because it applies Ice Blot, and I believe the Snow Shroud has an extra hitbox, or a slightly larger hitbox, if I can speak, compared to Nargacuga, but it's the same animation, same hitboxes physically at the very least. as far as I can tell. So as long as you know that one, or at the very least used to it, you can kind of just use the same protocol of avoiding it. Try to spin into here. I'm going to really try to just get close to him and attack. At the very least, attempt to. I'm getting walloped. The one here. Notes to the right. I'm going to charge a couple since he should be turning around and tackling. If he's too far away, he'll close that distance pretty quickly, so don't try to run up to him if you don't have to. Like here, he's going to close this distance very fast. Just kind of let him come to you. Don't worry too much about chasing him, because the more you chase him, the less time you'll actually have to deal damage. Looks like he's leaving now. All right, so shouldn't take too much longer. I'm sure I'll pass the 20-minute mark here, but we'll see. Now he's coming in here, I think from the side. I don't know if he'll do the aerial swoop from here. And it may not be guaranteed that he does it every single time, but I'm sure after, yes, okay. And after he finishes it, you should be fine with the legs being broken to actually throw an attack out there. Just make sure you dodge the initial hit. That would have been a great chance for Mega Boomerang, but I can't predict a roar always. It is just whenever he's not enraged, you can't anticipate it, especially closer to the end of the fight, because monsters really just like to enrage quite a bit there. That was very bad. You'll still be hit from behind as always with hip check, so I should have just tried to dodge there. And I did, but my timing was terrible. It's a tackle, dodging under it. For a couple of out here. And now that the legs are broken, I can go for the tail and stuff, which are much better damage. All right, here comes the swoop. Go ahead and throw this out. Again, you can see how long that recovery is for him, so you're pretty much free every single time he does that to get one out. He jumped right into the return throw on that, which is really good. We'll try to keep him from, or keep him to do that. That will also hit. Great. And since he's targeting you, you know, it'll go right to where it's going to finish. So it is actually a pretty good, at the very least, technique there. Not really a technique because you're kind of just sitting there anyways, waiting for the boomerang to go out. So whether or not he attacks you with the right attack is up to him, of course. But it does feel pretty nice when it does go off completely. I'm going to try to get this out here. This was a little late. I think I'll be fine. Looks like he's just jumping into a wall. And he's not been doing it, but if he flies back or jumps back into a wall, he can wall cling and attack, and that can catch you off guard for sure as well. That definitely reminds me of 5th gen monsters like Odogaron or something like that. So that's a very quick retaliation that you may not expect, because usually the jump back leads into a very long tail. But if I can get off the wall here, we'll try to keep from getting hit at the very least. But yeah, so if he is close to a wall, anticipate that, or else you will just kind of get swiped with something pretty quickly. There's the tail cut, and he did limp away, so I guess he wimped away too. Kind of how that works. I would too if I wasn't feeling very good. Get a knockdown on him, poor guy. Oh well, he shouldn't stay around too much longer. He's got poison on him. His legs are also weakened as well. I don't really think that matters that much at this point though. I mean, I guess it, you know, doesn't deal as little damage if I do clip into the wings, but it'd be better to be on the head and just get the extra damage, or the tail. But yeah, there we go. Right at the 20-minute mark, I think, or very close to, about 21 minutes. So yeah, again, not, if you're prepared for his tricks, you're fine. But if, you know, the first few times you're going to fight him, you'll probably have a bit of trouble actually getting used to what he's going to do. So either way, I'll cover him up and I'll meet you back at base. All right, back to the hub. Our next monster is much in the similar vein, being an ice monster, like I said before, obviously, but is also very different in many regards. The quest is called, I believe, the Big Push. Has us hunting a Hyper Gammoth in the Frozen Seaway, another similar thing. Go ahead and take the quest, and like I said before, same weapon as before. So go ahead and head on out. All right, Hyper Gammoth, unlike Barioth, is very slow, very large, has a very large, easy to hit weak spot. Her attacks move her somewhat, but not enough to the point where you can not punish her with a Mega Boomerang after. So once you get your buffs up and have a decent stock of support gauge, and ideally your cats also use Go Fight Win, you're in business. There's not really a lot of work you have to do to, like, you know, set up your damage, other than just the initial, obviously, support building gauge, or phase. Support gauge building phase, let's say it like that. I guess the more interesting parts are just trying to stay out of the way of Trimmer. That's the biggest thing that's kind of annoying with her, but that's kind of her whole point. So, you know, as long as you stay out of that range, you should be fine. And even for just like regular fighting, it's not that big of a deal. It's only for Mega Boomerangs, because obviously if you hit by Trimmer during a Mega Boomerang, you just completely lose it, which is not great, especially if you're paying the full price for it. So just stay away from that. Most of the time, her face or trunk will be applied with Hyper, and it may just kind of be a conglomerate there. I know they're different hit zones, but they may not be different Hyper spots, at the very least in how they power up their attacks. And then either one of the front or back legs, or not the back legs, but one of the front legs. So right now it's her left, and then it'll be her right one whenever she changes, if it changes. Another thing is the snowballs she throws into the air are also something you have to be careful about, because they can target you. If you're right and under her, then they will hit her and break. So it is a way to avoid that without putting in too much effort, and you know, you can continue attacking after that. And you know, obviously boomerang spins and stuff like hyper aggressive close range stuff is okay. Obviously the legs are not a great hit zone. Obviously the hyper version is going to have better hit zones on the hyper spots, but the trunk is above the ground, so it's a bit harder to hit with melee stuff. Not, you know, terribly difficult. It's just that a lot of her big wide AoE attacks do attack where the trunk is, because that's kind of just the design of the game. A lot of the stronger attacks are going to come from the face, charges, fireballs, whatnot. That way you can't just stand there and hit the weakest spot. So you do have to be careful about that if you're using a melee weapon, but if you're not, you're using something ranged, kind of just get free pickings. Try to use this free picking here. Even if she wants to turn around and hit me, it's going to take her a while. And if she tries to do the butt slam, then that's also going to take a while. Again, she's just very cursed with slow moving stuff. So her best bet at attacking you is either throwing out a Tremor hitbox or throwing out the snowballs that can hit you from range. You know, that's why I said they're the most annoying in regards to just her overall moveset. I mean, it's not that they're that annoying, it's just that they're the most annoying thing she has. And they're not really that annoying. You just have to, you know, make sure you're preparing for them correctly. And even then, at some points, you may be positioned weird enough to where it doesn't even matter and the snowball can't hit you. Or she just aims for your cats and doesn't hit you there. If you're trying to avoid the butt slam, just kind of Trimmer hitbox and stuff, wait for her to move a little bit before the initial attack, because it does come out pretty quickly if you're not looking for that initial slight tail. Because if you're waiting for like the actual hitbox of the attack before you actually start dodging, then you're going to get hit and it is going to throw you back a decent amount, just kind of waste some time for you. Another thing is her Snow Tantrum doesn't have very large hitboxes during like the first initial stuff. It's that final one where you're really trying to stay out of the way of like the Snow Shroud, because I do believe that does apply at the very least a larger Trimmer hitbox radius, if not a larger Snowman radius as well. So staying out of the way of that, at the very least at an appropriate distance. You don't have to be like super far, because obviously you don't really have to be too far away from her to be super far anyways. So relatively close is almost fine. You just have to get a feel for it, as per usual with a lot of the AoE attacks. You know, learning when it's safe and when it's not is the most important part about it. Looks like she's just doing her little snowball shots, so we're perfectly free to get this off here. And yeah, I mean, other than that, she's not really too different from her regular counterpart, other than maybe having stronger attacks somewhat and slightly slower timings on them, which don't really throw you off too much because they're already pretty slow. So you're just kind of waiting reactively anyways. You get hit by the horn there, or the tusk, not the horn, but it's not that bad. Get a tusk break, showing how quick that was. And again, I mean, she's just kind of, I know it's kind of awkward. I guess I maybe should have fought Barioth second for something more interesting, but she's always just kind of been the monster that's a big HP sponge that, you know, can deal out a lot of damage if you're getting too greedy. And she lends herself more to being the type of monster you get too greedy against, because she just is so slow. So you're kind of enabled into that a lot more. That way, when you do make the wrong decision, you are going to get hit pretty hardly for it. But, you know, as long as you have the idea of what the tail for the butt slam is, and you're not just saying, oh, look, she's doing a body slam, and not a butt slam. You know, as long as you're not making that mistake, you're pretty fine. Obviously, the butt slam's going to throw the trimmers backwards a little bit more, while the body slam's going to throw it forwards. That's kind of how it is. I think overall, the rear slam is a bit smaller as in a total area, as opposed to the body slam, which, you know, makes sense. Here comes the tantrum I was talking about earlier. That last one's where it hits a bit further forward. However, as you can see, it didn't really hit very far backwards. That was a bit awkward there. I should have just waited for the slam. I thought the little thing where she put her feet down was going to actually hit me there, and I could have evaded it, but it didn't actually work out. Just dodge that right there. Go for the face as she turns around. Haven't been getting a lot of go fight wins, so really just trying to build as much gauge as I can. That's another butt slam. She's going for the cats, so perfect chance for me to just get some damage off here on the face. Ideally, I'd be aiming lower and trying to hit the trunk, getting more gauge from that, but it doesn't really matter too much. Even your natural fire element is just going to be dealing so much damage on the face of the trunk that you don't have to worry too much about having it mega boomerangs off, because again, you're naturally just building gauge anyways. And actually, she does have hyper on the face, so that probably powers up her snowplow attacks. I'm not sure what else it would be, because I assume the trunk's like the little sweeping attacks and then the snowball shots and stuff like that. Like that's the only attack I could assume that the face powers up, as far as I remember at the very least. All right, limped away to this area, so we'll rev this mega boomerang up again. And similarly, or I guess on the opposite end, since there are no real phase changes or part breaks that change the fight too much, I think maybe if you break her trunk, her snowballs get smaller. Cannot speak at all. However, that doesn't really change really much of the fight at all. So, you know, unlike Barioth, you kind of just get to autopilot and pick out which attacks you want to try to go for a mega boomerang for, and then just kind of attack her regularly for the rest of it. And again, since she's so slow, a lot of times if she aims for your cats, that gives you like multiple openings for mega boomerangs. So as long as you're getting enough gauge, you're going to be sitting pretty fine just spamming those off in a corner while she's struggling to even hit you. And even like the terrain plays against her, because I believe in this area, since there's a roof, at the very least a low hanging roof, I think in the other area her snowballs will go off, but here, since the roof's so low, the snowballs just burst on the ceiling, so you don't even have to worry about those. It does just foil her a little bit, but I'm not going to complain about that, because that makes the hunt go even faster. At the very least, as fast as it can go for a Gammoth. She still does take a decent amount of punishment, as you can see here with the timer, you know, still being close to 20 minutes at the very least. If not, you know, that's what it'll be by the time I finish her off. But it's a fairly easy 20 minutes compared to something like Barioth, where you do have to pay attention for the most part. Just going to slam that there. This will give me an opening for Mega Boomerang. Get some nice soft hits on the face before it revs off, and then as we throw it, we'll finish her off. Again, not much to say about her. You know, she's very similar. You can't really see too many differences unless you fight them back to back, the regular version and the hyper version. So either way, I'll go ahead and cover up and meet you back at base. All right, back to the hub. Let's look at those weapons, if there's anything interesting about them. I think maybe the Barioth knife is interesting. So blue sharpness, not that great. 190 melee attack with 40 melee ice, which is okay. You know, that is, and that may be very close to being one of your best ice melee weapons. It is pretty good. The worst part is, again, the blue sharpness. Preferably, if we have blue sharpness, our melee attack would be like at the very least 210 or something like that. However, I believe it actually has positive affinity, 20%, I think, which is pretty nice. So that does offset the lower raw at the very least. And boomerang side is just, you know, worse, 10 less ice, same in the everything else. So you've got better ice weapons, and obviously the Snowbear and Stick double cross is just way better with 50 ice and 10 less raw for, yes, some negative affinity, but white sharpness. So kind of does offset there, like you know, it does here with the blue sharpness being offset by the positive affinity. Probably would go ahead and make this, honestly. I think it is very close to one of the best ice weapons. This one would be the comparable version, but you only get 5 more raw. You do get the white sharpness, which is pretty good. It does boost your ice element as well, and you don't get any positive affinity. So I think that's probably the closest comparison, at the very least on the physical side. And then a lot of the other ones are just ranged. So I'd say go ahead and make this list is probably your best now that I'm thinking about it. But if it's not, it's very close to it. So not a bad option. As for the Enormous Staff Cross R, 216 white sharpness, 24 on the melee side. It's obviously skewed more towards raw. Problem is negative 20% affinity is if you're using weakness exploit, you're offsetting that by having positive 30% affinity on weak spots. So maybe. And if you're using critical at large as well, you're up to 50%. However, I don't know. The lower ice element is probably a detriment to it, because if you're looking for a high melee weapon, you're probably going for something like the Bloodbath Hammer, or, you know, other options that you have for high crit if you're going for that. Plus 15% defense is negligible. You know, it's a bonus, but it's not really that worth it. And obviously, it's a close range weapon, so the boomerang side is awful. As for your armor, go ahead and look at the Barioth one first. 152, -8 fire resistance, 10 ice resistance. So it might combo with a bottom piece that has 10 ice resistance, if there are any. Gamma color is a bit more extreme. Actually, looks like it's worse. So same defense. However, -10 fire resistance and -6 thunder resistance. You get 6 water resistance, which the Barioth helm doesn't have. However, with the lower defense, the raw defense at the very least, picking specifically neutral elements is kind of not great when you have better higher raw options. So if you're trying to pick for specifically the higher end of the resistances, Barioth is just better. And if you're fighting multiple monsters, however, you're probably not going to fight an ice monster and a fire monster in the same hunt very often. I'm sure it happens. There's, you know, the Fated 4 quests, so Glavenus and Gammoth do appear together. However, Gammoth doesn't really use ice element too often compared to Glavenus, where a lot of his attacks are using the tail base, especially when it's heated. Needless to say, they're not your best options, so you make the regular version for the transmog if you really want it. All right, there we go. 2 more hyper monsters down. We don't have many left. Let's see how many we have, the single ones at the very least. So we have Glavenus, Uragon, Garuga, Tigrex, and then our multi-quests, which will maybe be something I do. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out as we go. Either way, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider leaving a comment below and maybe even consider subscribing. Until next time, bye.